Football is sold to us as the beautiful game. 90 minutes of joy, unity, a sport that brings the whole world together. But underneath the chants and the trophies is a history soaked in tragedy, exploitation, and blood. Stadiums that became death traps. Children sold like commodities. Dictators who used this sport as a weapon. Today, we're not talking about goals and glory. We're talking about the dark reality of football history. Long before referees and red cards, football didn't look anything like the sport we know. In medieval England, something called mob football was played between entire villages, sometimes hundreds of men on each side. There were no real rules. The ball could be carried, kicked, or fought over through streets, fields, and rivers. Broken bones were common. Deaths were not rare. It got so violent that English kings repeatedly tried to ban. Edward II outlawed it in London in the 1300s, partly because the chaos was disrupting archery practice, which the crown considered far more important to national defense than a game. For centuries, football wasn't a pastime. It was treated as a public hazard. The game we know today was eventually tamed and codified in the 1800s, but the violence didn't disappear. It just moved into the stands. Football stadiums were, for most of the 20th century, badly designed and dangerously overcrowded. And that failure cost thousands of lives. In Lima, Peru, in 1964, a disputed referee decision sparked a riot. Police responded with tear gas inside a packed, fenced stadium. In the crush to escape, more than 300 people died. It remains one of the deadliest disasters in sports history. In Scotland, Ibrox Stadium suffered multiple deadly crowd disasters across the 20th century, the worst in 1971, when 66 fans died on a stairway crush as crowds tried to leave the ground. In 1985, at Heysel Stadium in Brussels, rioting fans caused a wall to collapse, killing 39 people, mostly Italian supporters. English clubs were banned from European competition for 5 years as a result. And in 1989 at Hillsborough in Sheffield, 7 Liverpool fans died in a crush caused by overcrowding and police mismanagement. For decades, authorities and parts of the press wrongly blamed the fans themselves. It took over 25 years of campaigning by victims' families to get that record officially corrected. These weren't freak accidents. They were the predictable result of stadiums built without real safety standards, run by officials who valued ticket. Football has never just been a game. Authoritarian regimes have used it as propaganda for a century. In 1934, Italy hosted the World Cup under Mussolini's fascist government. Referees were allegedly pressured, and the tournament became a stage for the regime to broadcast. Italy won at home, and Mussolini used the victory as proof of fascist superiority. Decades later, Argentina hosted the 1978 World Cup, while its military junta was running secret torture and disappearance operations just kilometers from the stadiums. Some detention centers operated within earshot of the celebrating crowds. The junta used Argentina's tournament win to boost its public image, even as it was murdering its own citizens. And in apartheid South Africa, football was racially segregated for decades. Black South African players were barred from competing with or against white teams, and the country was eventually banned from FIFA competition altogether, a ban that lasted until apartheid ended in the early 1990s. Football didn't stay above politics. It was repeatedly weaponized by the same regimes that oppressed the people who loved it. In England, through the 1970s and 80s, far-right groups actively recruited inside football grounds, turning some terraces into spaces of organized racist intimidation. Black players in that era have described needing to develop a kind of armor just to take the pitch. It took organized campaigns, players, pundits, and supporters speaking out together to begin forcing clubs and governing bodies to treat racist abuse as a serious offense rather than part of the atmosphere. That fight is still ongoing today, often resurfacing through online abuse instead. Modern football's biggest hidden scandal isn't always on the pitch. It's in how the talent pipeline works. Across West Africa and parts of South America, informal scouting networks and unlicensed academies have, for decades, lured young boys, promises of European trials and stardom. Families have sold land or taken on debt to pay agents for opportunities that frequently turn out to be fraudulent. Investigations by international labor and human rights organizations have documented thousands of cases of trafficked youth footballers, boys brought to Europe, abandoned when they failed trials, left undocumented, homeless, and with no way home. FIFA has introduced rules to try to regulate international transfers of minors, but enforcement remains inconsistent, and the underlying economic pressure, desperately poor families, a sport worth billions, and almost no oversight at the grassroots level, hasn't gone away. And then there's what happens when football collides with global construction money. When Qatar was awarded the 2022 World Cup, it needed to build entire stadiums, roads, and a metro system largely from scratch, using a migrant labor force from countries like Nepal, India, and Bangladesh, working under the country's sponsorship labor system. Investigations by international media organizations estimated that thousands of migrant workers died in Qatar in the years connected to World Cup-related construction, many from heat exposure and unsafe conditions, though Qatari officials disputed how many of those deaths were directly tied to World Cup projects specifically. FIFA awarded the tournament. FIFA collected the broadcasting billions. The workers who built the stadiums rarely appeared in the opening ceremony. Even football's own governing body hasn't escaped its dark side. In 2015, the U.S. Department of Justice indicted more than a dozen FIFA officials on charges including bribery, fraud, and money laundering, tied to the awarding of World Cup hosting rights and broadcasting deals. It confirmed what many fans had suspected for years, that decisions worth billions of dollars, which country gets the World Cup, which networks get to broadcast it, were in some cases being bought and sold behind closed doors. None of this means football isn't beautiful. It is. It's brought joy to billions of people who have very little else to celebrate. But loving this sport doesn't mean ignoring what it's cost. The lives lost in stadiums that should have been safe, the children exploited by a system built on their hope, the workers who built the stages we cheer in. The beautiful game has a dark history. Understanding it doesn't make us love football less.